to your Monday edition of Live Market Update and Charts of the Day. I hope you're great. I hope you've had a wonderful weekend. Thank you very much for popping in today. It's always a pleasure and a privilege to have this opportunity to share some ideas about what may be happening and what may happen next, as well, of course, as check out some charts to see if anything is looking interesting from a technical point of view. Of course, before we start, as we're looking at live markets, please remember that this is for educational purposes only. And what that means in practical terms is that you need to do your own due diligence on anything you see here. Make sure you follow trading plans. Make sure you manage risk on every trading action that's on entry and exit, consistent with your personal trading objectives and financial situation. That important message been shared. Let's get into the stories of the day. And of course, first place to start, of course, is the US markets. We did see yet more positivity despite the US government shutdown and US China tensions. Uh, there appears to be some movement, certainly on the latter, with reports that there is a meeting planned for this week between Trump and President Xi. Trump is in Asia making deals. Um, wouldn't be surprised to see him pop in to see his mate in Indonesia, the new positive relationship that seems to have developed over the last few weeks, uh, as well as a CPI number that came in sort of a little shy of expectations, but was still up to the 3% level. Markets responded well to that, but also responding well to the reports coming across the wires from company earnings season. We've got a staggering 83%, 87% of beating expectations on EPS, 83% beating revenue expectations. Quite remarkable, but bear in mind, of course, we've only got around about 20% of the S&P 500 reported so far. So some big players this week, lots of the big tech companies reporting, as well as some big industrials. So if you are trading the Nasdaq futures at all this week, just be careful when big companies do report. On top of that, of course, we've got Fed action with their rate decision after their two-day meeting, which starts tomorrow. US futures are positive so far on the back of that US China talk news. Asian markets are positive. ASX, when last I looked about 5 minutes ago, was around about 0.2% to the upside. European futures also pointing to a positive open. We've seen a few gaps on the back of that news open up. So things like copper are doing well also. Now, the US dollar index seems stuck as it has been for the last 3 or 4 sessions. Gold hasn't moved very much either, trading around 4,100, sort of consolidating after that last week's pullback that we saw. As I've already suggested, copper is looking strong, and we must have a look at a chart of that as it may test resistance. And we had that surge in oil last week on the back of discussions between the US and India. But we've seen a pause since then. Again, we'll check out a chart in a moment. Bitcoin had a strong week last week, followed through to move back towards 120,000 after being sticky a little around that 112. But certainly the buyers look as though they're in. Again, we'll check out a chart. A really busy week this week, although it's a quiet day today. As I said, we've got the Fed decision this week. We've got Aussie CPI also due out on Wednesday. We've got the BOJ rate decision and their press conference on Thursday, and US PCE on Friday, which of course is the Fed's favorite inflation number. So that being covered, a good day to Lita and David. Hi, I hope you're well. Right, let's have a look at some charts, shall we? And a good place to start is the Nasdaq, of course. You can see there a nice close on Friday, but look at today's price action. If we just put this 30-minute chart on, there's the gap up. Haven't really moved much since Asian Open, but that was a significant jump to the upside on the back of that trade news, around about just under 1% actually in terms of the gap to the upside. So very positive. Of course, we've seen that across all of the major indices. And if we look at the US dollar, as I said, looking a bit pausey, a little soft today. There's that sort of long wick candle after that CPI number came out. We can have a quicker, closer look at that. Very scary looking candle on the hourly chart. But it did bounce back really quickly. If we have a look at the 5 minute chart there, you can see there within 5 minutes, it had retraced almost 70%. So positivity there, a bit of a mixed bag. The number was beneath expectations, but was still higher than perhaps the market would like, which is why we got this adverse candle here. You would have expected gold to do pretty well on the back of that, but you can see it's sort of stuck in this range between around around about 40.50 and 41.50. You can see there we're currently trading just underneath 4100. We've been playing with that for most of the day today. Um, just underneath that 4100 level. So a bounce off this 4056 looks important. We had a slight gap down on open, and then we've sort of seen the buyers come in. But we're starting to establish a couple of key levels here, which are worth keeping an interest on. No such dramas with copper. Really nice move to the upside. Nice gap up in this morning's trading. It's 512 we talked about last week being important. After it breached $5, it made its way up there. There's the gap today. We have actually tested this resistance around about 523. You can see its importance. It tested it on the 9th of October, also back here in June and back here in March as well. So all in all, a positive day for copper, but we are just coming off what was an enthusiastic start. Be interesting to see whether this gap is filled or whether this gap becomes a support in the short term. So watch a move for a move beneath 517 if you're scalping. There could be an opportunity on a breach of that. But certainly the vibe is good um, for copper. Here's oil. As I said, we had that surge during the early part of last week. A bit of a profit taken Friday and really nothing much going on today. We are poised beneath this resistance at around about 62.35, which is a level worth keeping an eye on for sure. And then there's Bitcoin. So came down, tested the 200 MA again, really strong. Essentially 5 trading sessions, particularly if you include today's as well. If we just sort of put a line in the sand around about this 11,800 mark, I think this could be important. You can see lots of price consolidation around here. So it wouldn't surprise me to see it move up to around about 117,600. I like 118 uh, as a potential look at. If we do breach that, could be a move back up to 123. Or in the FX world, as I said, although the US dollar has been pretty flat, the yen has been certainly not so, and you can see that move up in the US yen on the daily chart to take us up to a key level at around about 153. Testing that in today's trading today, actually breached that in early doors, but then pulled back into this range. So we're looking possibly for a breach of 153.20 if buyers come back in again. No such dramas on the Aussie yen, which keeps on looking really strong. If we put it on the daily chart, you can see there's a clear support at around about 97.40 and resistance there at that nice round number of 100 that was tested. That's about 3 weeks ago. So there we're sitting right now. So having breached that range in the gap up today, like a couple of assets actually, we're looking really short term at this short term range here. So move over 115 could be a 40 pip move to the upside, and move beneath 99.87, which is tested in the last 30-minute candles. You can see us back into this range, close the gap, and potentially even test this range here. So on a little bit of really worthwhile being patient. Again, it might be this afternoon that we get some clarity on direction with these as a few more smaller news items come across the wires, but certainly the Aussie yen is looking quite strong. GB pound yen, not a dissimilar situation. Would probably put a resistance at the high of today. If we just look at daily chart for context, you can see there if we look at 2204, there's potential move up to 204.70. I quite like this as a chart, actually. Um, but if we look, actually, I'll just switch this over to just some of the key things that we're sort of seeing with the dashboard today. Um, so you see there some strength in the Canadian dollar as well. Why isn't these coming up? Um, I wanted to have a look at the GB pound Aussie. So this is interesting. The GB pound Aussie was also another chart that caught my eye today. It looked up to the downside weakness in the GB pound, but just a little recovery. But we have got a support here around about 203.51. So Aussie is slightly stronger than the GB pound against the yen, although the GB pound yen is slightly cleaner than the Aussie yen. Um, but I am going to plant my flag in the GB pound yen on the daily chart. You can see it did touch this 204 today, so we're looking for a breach of 204 for a potential move up to test 204.70. Worthwhile being really patient with this, but that's my chart of the day um, for FX. As I said, good day at the office for ASX stocks, generally speaking, at this stage. Megaport looking rather nice. Let's check out the. We're looking at lithium stocks last week. They are up, but you can just sort of see a little bit of struggle to hold that. Um, Rare earth stocks not looking so clever today. We're also keeping an eye on a potential bounce in Yan coal. You can see that bounce in full force. Not an update today. Um, so we're going to look further afield for some options. Megaport has some work to do, but is potentially stuck underneath around that 1675. So it's worthwhile being patient for that. 360 ASX we've talked about. There's a really sharp bounce off that. We did say watch last week. We watched this sort of 5 week test. There's Friday's candle on like a Thursday. Completely closed this gap now. $50 is under pressure, and we like this. Should we get a breach of 50, let's say 50.63, we like this for a retest of around about 55. So that's certainly worth keeping on the radar. Zipco is another one we've been tracking up another 4% today. Um, Again, this is one that seems to have bounced up support fairly nicely. Possible move up to 432, and then I think you get the higher probability trade, which because that sort of brings us back into this range. So that's probably worth one keeping an eye on during the course of the week rather than today. And maybe let's just have a look at a couple of others we haven't checked out for our Qantas isn't looking very attractive. Um, Sunfire. Sunfire looks good on the back of strength in copper, but we're really just sort of moving our way back up to 1678. Some of the, obviously, some of the gold stocks are recovering a little bit. Um, Vulcan Energy in the lithium space looks to be fairly solid as a support around about 462. Again, too early really to sort of get excited about this, I think. Let's have a look at ASB. Oops. Let's have a look at AAC in the cattle space. That's actually a nice move. 145 does look like a really important price point on this, doesn't it? I'm not sure of the potential upside in this. So maybe just hold off on that. Banks are doing okay today. Fortescue might be worth a look. Let's see, Fortescue is bimbling around highs that we haven't seen for a considerable amount of time. Last time we were at these levels was back here in September last year. Could be. I'm sort of looking at this level around about 21.20. If you're in this already, um, sorry, yeah, 21.20. If you're not in this already, that's potentially a confirmation of trend continuation. So possibly worth keeping an eye on. And Breville Group are having a nice bounce, but that's not interesting me much. Gold stock, Drone Shield, Aerospace Defense. Looks as though it's found a nice home, just over 450 there. Could be worth keeping an eye on. Might get interested if it breaches $5. Okay, so I'm going to plant my flag in 360 ASX. I think a breach of $50, let's say $50.50, take us over this, back into this range, possibly move up to 55.89, so around about a 10% potential move to the upside. Check out on when they're reporting in the US as well. Obviously, they're a US-based company. Um, so just check out that. But that's my chart of the day for the ASX. On to, there we go. Tech stocks. We talked AMD last week. It's going to be difficult to look beyond this, but there you see the big bounce um, through 240 for AMD in advanced. I was trading through 250. That's going to be very, very difficult to beat as a potential stock of interest. Tesla are sort of range bound, so they're not sort of jumping up and down. With that, nice bounce on REMX, which is the rare earth ETF in the US that we talked about last week. Obviously, doesn't trade extended hours, but um, we are sort of watching. If you put it on a line chart, you'll just see this price action here in a bit more clarity. So we are looking for a potential breach of 74.11. Obviously, if it bounces down on that, we've potentially got a head and shoulders formation, but a move through 74, it see us back up to 80. That's certainly worth keeping an eye on. Micron, pull back here. Interesting to see where that goes next. Obviously, there is the perky candle, which again is trend continuation. Micron continues to look very strong. It would be amiss of me not to have a quick look at Nvidia, of course. They're up again 2% in extended hours trading. I'm not sure I would get really excited about this unless it breached 200. Obviously, a lot of these companies have still got to report. So that's worth bearing in mind, of course. And we talked airlines last week. Let's just put this on there. There we go. So watch Delta. We're eyeing 62.30. That was resistance through a lot of August into early September. Retesting that now. So the two we're keeping an eye on. A Delta for a breach, and AMD look as though they're going to fly. Those are my two US charts to keep an eye on. So there you go. That's us done. That's us cooked. I hope that's been interesting and useful. Of course, thank you very much for popping in. If you wouldn't mind just popping a little like on the video if you can. I hope you have a wonderful day and a great week. We shall see you on Thursday, if not before. See some of you before that, obviously, on various EA sessions, and of course Inner Circle on Wednesday. It'd be fantastic to see you there. In the meantime, take care. Have a wonderful rest of your Monday. We'll see you soon. Bye bye for now.